It's really nice to see so many faces. I'm really excited today to talk about our wellbeing solution and our wellbeing approach that we've been working really hard on here at Sabio. The message that I bring today is rooted in Sabio's values of community, integrity, and care. Care for people and care for service. So a little bit about me before we dive in. I'm a psychologist, I'm a research psychologist across various fields, but the ones that are most relevant for today are cognitive psychology and human technology interaction. So cognitive psychology is understanding how people receive information from their environment, process that information, and make decisions based on that information. And today I'm going to be talking about well-being and how we've used psychology to improve our well-being approach within the contact center sector. So it's a topic that struggles with being, or having a sense of being overplayed. It's a topic that people often feel as though it's a nice to have, and it's a topic that can also have a sense of being a virtue signaling exercise without actually demonstrating much clout. So what I'm going to try and convince you of today is that addressing well-being and having the right approach to well-being is actually fundamental to achieving business outcomes. So that's my aim for today. I'm going to take you through the Sabio solution and try to convince you of that. So last year, my colleague Amy King highlighted some of the issues that we're seeing in the sector at the moment. And some of these will be really familiar to you guys. So namely, agent attrition, agent absence, and agent presenteeism. Agent presenteeism being when people aren't taking time off work when they should, or not engaging with their work when they're there. So there was a report released last week by the CCMA and sponsored by Sabio that really highlighted the extent of these issues within the contact center sector. And I would really urge you to go and take a look at the research. If you take a look on the CCMA website, it really demonstrates the impact that it's having and the impact that it has on business outcomes. Now, Amy highlighted, which is where I come in, the real true need for behavioral science in solving these problems. So we're dealing with a human problem. Human psychology, human health are at the core of this problem. We need to use all of the relevant information to be able to solve the problem. We also need to use data. We need to use analytics. We need true insight into the problem of well-being so we can measure and track and understand the direction that we're taking. And what we want to do is we want to be able to move from this isolated action phase of well-being. So a lot of companies at the moment are trying to make a difference. We're all trying to do the right thing. We recognize that there's a problem with well-being in the sector. We recognize that it's having a negative impact on business outcomes. But we're kind of trying out actions without getting to the root cause. So what that means is there might be a fruit bowl in the kitchen or a yoga session to try, but it doesn't feel like it's making enough of a difference. And that's because we're not connecting data and insight to that action. We're not understanding the impact of the action. And it's not connected to those strategies, those wider business strategies. So what we're aiming to do at Sabio is to help organizations move from that reactive, isolated action phase, which we're calling the tick box stage. So, okay, we need to work on well-being. Let's try this. Does it work? Not sure. Into this stage of meaningful change. And what meaningful change means is that we can have this integrated feedback loop. We have the data that tells us if what we're doing works, and we have a strategy that supports all of the movement in the well-being world. And it's really important to understand what's the end goal? Where can we get to if this meaningful change works? So this looks like our employees are happy, they're not leaving, they don't need to take extra time off because of stress, and they're engaged at work, they're confident and they're happy. It means that customers are receiving the best service that they can, and we know that there's a link between agent happiness and customer satisfaction. It also means that organizations' reputation is high. It's a huge differentiator for organizations if they can get this right. So that's all well and good. We understand that there's an issue. We understand that we need psychology to address this issue. And we understand the end point, where we want to get to. But the question is how? So how do we use psychology? How do we use behavioral science? Which data do we use? And how do we use that data to get us where we want to go? So they're the questions that I'm hoping to answer here today. I'm going to be taking you through our Sabio Wellbeing approach, which has 3 stages. And I'm going to be talking through the psychological theory that sits behind that to help create lasting change. So the first phase of our wellbeing approach is a consultancy wrap. So this means we can start to get to the root of the issue and benchmark wellbeing across our wellbeing model. The second phase is our wellbeing technology. So this is technology that takes the right data to help us understand wellbeing across all levels of the organization and helps us to track that change so we know that we're doing the right thing. The third stage is quarterly engagement. So this means that rather than taking data, getting some insights and kind of rolling with it without potentially fully understanding the insights or potentially customizing it to particular teams or organizations, we can actually help customers and help clients to really get the most out of the data, really create content that's right for them, that's the right fit, and makes it really sticky, and really supports both employees and managers, but also informs that wider strategy. So through all these stages, we need psychology. We need to answer questions such as, what is well-being? Why are we acting as we are, and how can we change behavior? And these are the questions that are critical to our approach. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to guide you through some really key concepts that underpin our approach to well-being and the psychology behind what we do. So the first is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a set of beliefs that we hold about our ability to complete a particular task. So when we're working with customers across these 3 stages, we're always trying to increase self-efficacy so people feel that they can change and are much more likely to want to change their behavior towards healthy well-being. A second really key concept that I want you to keep in mind as we work through those 3 stages is social norms. So if you were at Bruce Daisley's talk earlier, he mentioned social norms, community. These are really, really key, and they're hugely powerful over individual behavior. And social norms are expected behaviors that we see when we belong to a group. So one thing that we do across those 3 stages of our approach is to understand the social norms that exist, the impacts that they have on well-being, and how we can change them. And we help customers change the social norms to support healthier well-being for all employees. The third area is cognitive dissonance. So this is a concept that's rooted in the idea of recognizing contradictions in thought. So for example, if an employee has a real passion and want to solve customer problems, but they're feeling that they can't because of slow technology or really strict scripting, it means that they'll have this contradiction between what they want to do and what they're able to do. And this can cause real stress for employees. Another example is if an organization says, right, we really value our employees, thanks guys, but an employee on the other side of that thinks, actually, I don't feel very valued. That creates this cognitive dissonance. There are these 2 sides to thought that you can hold in your mind at the same time, but recognize as being stressful. So what we do, again, is to work with organizations to recognize where that cognitive dissonance occurs. Where are their values being stated that maybe aren't felt on the floor? Where are cognitive stresses happening that we can reduce and improve well-being for employees? So the kind of tool I'm going to use today to work through our solution is this idea of resilience. So Bruce Daisley spoke about this a little earlier, and it really teed up our talk really well. Because what Bruce said is that resilience isn't just built on an individual. The onus isn't on an individual. And that's definitely the point of view that we hold with our wellbeing assistant and with our wellbeing approach. So a kind of old school view of resilience is that, you need to be able to bounce back. You need to be able to deal with and respond positively to adversity, kind of in isolation of other people. And there are skills that can be taught in order to boost your resilience. And while this is true to a degree, there are things like cognitive transformation training, and that type of thing actually focuses quite a lot on self-efficacy. So that concept that I just mentioned, it helps people to build confidence and feel like they can change, they can be more resilient in particular situations. But actually, it's only really a part of the picture. In the reality, individuals are not isolated from leadership and from wider organizations, from that wider community. Social identity theory states that when you belong to a group, when you have those social norms, you identify with the factors that of that group. So if a group identifies as resilient or states that they're resilient, you see behaviors within that group of resilience, you're much more likely as an individual employee to be resilient. So it's not that if you're on your own, you're going to respond in a more resilient way. Actually, the complete opposite. You need a community that espouses resilience. And the other side of this is the organizational culture. So the job resource demands model that we use and that underpins a lot of our model I'm going to go through states that resources within your workplace, demands that you experience within your workplace, can either drain energy or build your energy, build your resilience. So the environment that we create also really, really impacts an individual's resilience. So the right environment is what we need to have a resilient employee. So what we do as part of our approach is examine each of these levels: organizational, leadership, and employee. And our mission is to make sure that each of these levels supports employee resilience. So that means having realistic plans and intelligent strategy. It means having evidence-based action. And it means supporting healthy behaviors through those social norms, through building confidence. And we look at each of the stages of our approach, so the consultancy, the technology, and the quarterly engagement, at the maturity of those resilience markers. So we examine culture and environment to make sure that it's supporting and empowering employees. So we do recognize that those personal skills contribute to resilience. And a big part of our model and approach is based on positive psychology. And positive psychology is a branch of psychology that states that rather than avoiding negative well-being, we can actually use positive emotions, things like confidence, resilience, to build and thrive. So we use a lot of that kind of ethos within our work, and we do recognize the need to build up individual confidence. But it's not just about that. There's a real need to recognize these other areas and tackle those when trying to build employee resilience. So the first is having technology that enables and empowers individuals. The second is having an environment that collects data that informs that strategy with visible action. The third is leadership. So we know that that leadership's really, really important to resilience, having strong leadership with strong communication and trust. The fourth is fulfillment. So this is the satisfaction that an employee has within their role. Are they confident in their role? Are they engaged? Are they wanting to engage further in their role? Do they have a career path laid out? And the final one that I'm going to talk about today is culture. Does the culture and the social norms support resilience? Does it support healthy well-being? So I'm going to walk through a few of these different areas, the first being fulfillment. So as I said, this is defined as the satisfaction that an employee gets from their role. Are they feeling confident? Are they enjoying what they're doing? Now, this is actually something that's becoming harder and harder for agents to experience. In the past, agents were dealing with a lot of repetitive calls. There was a particular process set up in the working environment to help them to manage those repetitive calls. So that's specific scripting, having back-to-back calls, and you'd perhaps get a complex call, every 1 in 5 calls, something like that. But now, with the introduction of AI, we know that the calls are much more likely to be complicated and difficult, potentially with emotional elements. And what this means is, because the processes we have in place were to support a different type of working, and they haven't been updated, it means that agents can feel really disconnected from success. It can make them feel as though they're not achieving what they should do. They can't solve problems very easily. They feel potentially disconnected from the success of the organization as well. And they can become really emotionally exhausted. So I know Consuelo mentioned earlier that actually this is a really, really key area to get right. Those complex calls are really high-value calls, and we need to be able to empower our employees to solve them with empathy skills and the human touch. So these expectations are rooted in customer experience. We have this partnership with AI, but we really need to empower humans as that role has changed, so we can work alongside AI and not feel kind of constricted by those old-fashioned processes. So what would agents benefit from? There are a few ways to improve fulfillment that we are aware of. It's just kind of trying them out and making change to address these issues that we're seeing. Unfortunately, we know that emotional exhaustion at work and feeling disconnected from organizational pride are two of the key factors for agents in contact centers wanting to leave. So it's really, really crucial that we solve this problem. Now, the first at the top of that list on the right is autonomy, increased autonomy in their role. And this is something Bruce Daisley mentioned earlier. We know that stress is heightened when we don't feel in control. So increasing that autonomy for employees can be really, really key. We also need to increase those key skills that bring those human touch. So that's things like empathy skills and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is being able to perceive, evaluate, express, and manage emotions. So you can already see that having those skills is really, really crucial, both for the well-being of the agent themselves and also for being able to deal with customers in a sensitive and intelligent way. As well as the increase in those types of skills, we can also try to increase the sense of value that agents feel, that sense of accomplishments at work, as well as the sense that they're valued on that front line and making sure that they feel engaged in what they're doing. I think that's really, really, well, that's what's come through from the research that's out there. But the problem is, where do we start? Which is going to work, and which one do we kind of kick off with? And that's where our well-being model comes in. So we understand from psychology that these things should make a positive difference in well-being. But which one? And how do we know the difference that it makes? So we've developed this model of well-being. So this is based on research with people who've experienced burnout, and it's validated across many different psychological models of well-being. Each of the different petals is an area of workplace activities within the workplace that may impact somebody's well-being. The 4 key areas are emotions, boosts, pressures, and behaviors. So what we can start to do is map a person's well-being across all of these different areas. Emotions are somebody's subjective experience of their workplace. So this may be things like, am I in flow? Am I feeling calm? Boosts are environmental aspects. So are there things in my environment that help boost my energy? So this might be particular relationships or managerial support. This might be a sense of accomplishment. Pressures, on the other hand, are aspects of our environment that drain energy. So once we get data across this model, it helps us to recognize which aspects of our environment are boosting our resilience and which are taking resilience and energy away. That fourth area is behaviours. So what behaviours are people putting in place to help to support well-being? So that might include being able to switch off from work. It might mean getting enough rest or creating boundaries between work and life. So what we aim to do with this model is to be able to map an individual's well-being to this so we can track the impact of different actions and initiatives that try to improve employee fulfillment. And it really underpins each of the three areas of our well-being approach. During our initial consultancy phase, we benchmark well-being across this model. We then use the well-being technology to continuously track well-being across these areas. And what this means that we can do is flag particular areas of well-being that employees are particularly struggling with. So that means managers can save time, it means managers can have the right conversations, and they can support their employees. During that quarterly engagement, we help organisations interpret all of these results. What do the results mean? Where are we seeing improvements, and what can we do? We can also tailor content and information based on the data that we get across this model. And the way that we collect data is through our Wellbeing Assistant. So if you've made it down to the booth downstairs, my colleague Nigel and colleague Nick are down there, and they'll be really happy to show you the Wellbeing Assistant that we've got. So a contact centre employee would be able to log on and answer questions that mean that we can map their experiences across that model. That data and information will be assessed by the Wellbeing Assistant, and they'll receive feedback, tips, tools, resources that can help them to understand, notice behavioural changes, and be able to make create actions that can help them to improve that particular area of well-being. So it's really tailored to that employee experience. Once we have that data from employees, it can then be aggregated, and that means that managers can get a bird's eye view of anonymous data, so you'd never see an individual's particular well-being map. But managers can get an overview of their team, where, like I said, where there's particular areas that they're struggling, and help them to kind of understand where actions need to take place and create those action plans. And all of this helps us to work towards a systematic approach to well-being. So if you remember that first slide where we had those actions, those isolated actions, that's a very reactive view to well-being. It means that reactions are kind of potluck. Some people might have managers who are really empathetic or are able to create initiatives that are really helpful to well-being. Others might have a manager who finds it really difficult or doesn't really engage with the topic. So that would be a reactive approach to leadership. What we can do once we've got this rich well-being data is we can start to move companies towards this systematic approach. And what that means is that well-being is a core focus of strategy. It means that there's systematic and continuous measurement so we can prevent issues and we can have proactive initiatives. And this means that benefits are widespread rather than being limited with those reactive, isolated actions. So next is leadership. As I said, high-quality leadership we all know, is really, really important to employee resilience. But we also need to support leaders. We often get asked the question, okay, leaders are going to be able to get some information, they're going to be able to get data. Is that not going to be more work for leaders? Is that going to be really difficult or time-consuming? And actually, the data that we collect should really empower and inform leaders to be able to make the right changes. But we also need leaders to have particular skills. So what we do is we try to increase that systematic approach to leadership skills. And there are three paths of impact that leaders can have. The first one is a people process. So this is a people one-to-one interactions, what we see our managers do. When we converse with our managers, how are they acting, what are they saying? So we really focus on empathy skills and emotional intelligence skills with our leaders to make sure that that's standardized across. The second one is around how leaders change an environment to either support or to change the workplace for the employees. So the second area that we look at with leaders is how can we change an environment to support a community feel? How do we help leaders to create the right social norms to support resilience at the individual level? The third is role modeling. So role modeling is a really, really key area of leadership. And there's some really, really interesting research about the effect of presenteeism in leadership on team members, and that if you have a leader that's kind of coming into work or not engaging or not taking time off when needed, it's very, very likely that you're going to see your team do the exact same thing. And that's the case across many different types of behaviours. So what we do is we help and support leaders to make sure that their behaviours are exhibiting really healthy kind of well-being choices, so that they're mimicked or copied by their employees and team members. And we do that across each of the 3 stages. So in Spotlight, we understand the maturity of these 3 areas across leadership. What is the approach at the moment? Where do we need to get to? What are the next steps in improving leadership approach? In the technology, we provide targeted tips and tools. So rather than having a kind of one-size-fits-all for leadership, each of the managers and team leaders can get a different view of where they need to improve, what types of action they need to take in order to benefit their team and improve their leadership. And we do team leader training. So this spans, like I said, the initial spotlight when we benchmark, but also repetitively. So we build upon that training to make sure that it's kind of kept alive, and that the benefits of the technology and the skills learned are kind of consistent and continuous. So the next I'm going to talk about is culture. So culture is really, really key, as we all know. And again, Bruce Daisley talked a bit about culture earlier. So recognizing that sense of community and the social norms that exist is really, really important. So it's something that we examine in depth during our consultancy, and it's something that our wellbeing model helps to also measure. What are the cultures that underpin the behaviours that we see? So the way that we can understand culture and the way that we approach our kind of mapping of culture with organisations is first understanding cultural artefacts. So what these are the visual things that we can see that help us to understand what a culture is. So for example, an artifact might be people shaking hands when they enter the office, or how people talk to each other when they enter a meeting. The second is stated values. So these are the values that you might see on an organisational website, or values that are kind of stated during annual meetings, that type of thing. And these don't always match up with the artifacts that we see. In fact, what we do see instead is that people have underlying assumptions that can differ from those stated values. So for example, if the artifact is speaking a particular way to certain people in meetings, a stated value might be respect all colleagues, something like that. But the underlying assumption might be, oh, I need to respect and talk in a certain way to my seniors, but actually I can be kind of offhand with junior staff. So these underlying assumptions are the kind of real areas of culture that we need to unpick and unpack when we work with organisations. And as I said earlier, this is where we can start to see that cognitive dissonance and the effect of that cognitive dissonance when those stated values differ from those underlying assumptions. So it's all about talking to employees, getting to the roots of their experiences within the workplace. So once we've been able to map that and understand that, we need to be able to change culture. How do we change those social norms? How do we make sure culture supports a healthy well-being? So the first step, which is what we do within Spotlight and also within the quarterly review sessions, is to state our values, to restate our vision. What do we want to achieve with these cultural changes? What do we want from our well-being approach? Where do we want to get to? The next is storytelling. So what we do when working with organisations is help to create trust, is to engage employees in the story. Now, this means helping people to understand what it means for them. Okay, my organisation is involved with this new wellbeing initiative. What does that mean for me? What will it change for me? And why should I care? Why should I be interested in it? Why should I engage with this wellbeing assistant? It's creating those stories, creating that engagement and trust. The next stage is enabling and creating the initiative. So what we do is we support organisations in rolling out our technology, in rolling out all of the training, in all of the communications that we have with employees. We do focus groups and interviews with employees to help them to understand and create a common language of wellbeing. And it really helps managers and employees to create a real community and sense of, let's go for it behind this initiative and approach. And all of this work means that we can start to see changes in culture through a shared understanding and common knowledge of wellbeing. It starts to create healthy artifacts, particular behaviours that we can see, particular behaviours from leadership that employees can copy. And really, really key to changing culture is this iteration. So this is why we have this third stage of quarterly engagements. We have this data that we measure, we have our vision, we've got people engaged. How do we kind of make sure that this is actually changing culture? We need to iterate, we need to build on where we've got to. We need to understand what we need to do next to make sure that this way of working sticks. So next I'm going to talk about environment. And this is the final area that I'm going to go through today. So as I said, with the environment, what's really, really key here to make sure that well-being is systematic is having data that's collected from across those areas of the organisation. It means that we have shared insight, and it means that we have really visible action and an explicit strategy that's known across all employees and that they can feel kind of involved with. So we work with this model, collecting that data, helping to build strategy, and with targeted action to make sure that that environment really, really supports employee well-being. And that includes helping people to form habits and break habits. So within our wellbeing technology, like I said, they get a score for their well-being, they get a description of things like their risk to burnout, where they might need to improve. We also have built into our technology steps that help people to behaviour change. So that means helping people to understand where they are, so self-reflection tools, psychological theories that underpin what they're going through. We help them to understand which behaviours are signals of risk or difficulty. So we guide them through all of this information to support particular actions. So as well as that, we also have these action tips that, okay, once I've self-reflected and understand, actually this is somewhere that I might need to change, this is a risk area for me, what can I do about it? So we really help individuals to guide behaviour change. And what's really, really key for habit forming is understanding these three areas, so personal factors, the impact of environmental factors, and those behavioural patterns. So this comes back to that wellbeing model that I showed and those 4 different areas. Personal factors include things like subjective experience. What am I feeling? What are my attitudes towards wellbeing? Environmental factors are those pressures, those boosts. What's helping me? What isn't helping me? What do I need to seek out? What do I need to stop? What do I need to talk to my manager about fixing? And those behavioural patterns. So as I said, getting enough rest, being able to switch off, having a healthy life-work balance. How can I create those boundaries? So what we do is we help people to understand where in particular those habits are causing difficulty, how those 3 areas link together, and help them to create those So habits are based on cues, so we help them to identify where those cues sit and how all of those personal, environmental, and behavioural factors can feed in to a habit and to support that kind of formation of new habits. And it's really, really exciting, actually, because what we can do with this data and with this improved wellbeing environment is to really support high performance within contact centres. So we already have a lot of data that helps us to understand the performance of individuals. It helps us to understand customer experience and the interaction between the two. But what we can do is we can augment that to understand how well-being impacts performance. And what we're going to be doing over the next year is taking digital data, so this type of operational data, working patterns, that type of thing, and cross-referencing those with the well-being data that we get from employees. So what that means is that we can understand how particular ways of working are impacting well-being. And that means that we can provide really, really targeted actions or steps that managers can take to support particular teams or with particular areas of work. So this, if we've had difficult calls or calls of a particular length, this is something that will help. And we can track that. We can see the impact that that has across that wellbeing model. And if we do all of this, if we look across all of those areas of resilience, across those 3 stages of the Sabio solution, it means that we can expect to see reduced attrition. We can expect to see reduced absence and reduced presenteeism. And it means that we can improve the customer experience. Agents can feel in control. They can feel that they can problem solve flexibly. They have the skills and the resources to be able to solve customer problems. And it really, really kind of brings it home that with the right approach, everybody wins. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, please come and find me down at the booth, and I'm very, very happy to answer. Thank you.